What's going on, everybody? Core conversations for Thursday. Happy St. Patrick's Day to my Irish friends and family. Hope everyone's doing well. We are doing a live today. Grab the round cup because it's dad goals as always. And yeah, we're gonna have a good time as always. So thank you for always joining us. 10 o'clock every day, Eastern Standard Time for Core Conversations. So that's what's up. Got a couple of housekeeping things to do. Still waiting on our podcast to be uploaded correctly, but it's all good. Pilatescari, how are you? Thanks for joining us in yesterday's conversation. That was super fun. What online classes and workshops? Pin a comment for you to just write down what is going on. Writing this. Cool. You know what? I'm loving them too. And Pilatescari, where are you? I think did I ask you where you're located last time? I'd love to have you join me at some point too. Message me so we can book in a time to have you on air. FP Fitness Real, thanks for joining us as well. I'm actually going to follow up on that conversation, so I want to kind of continue the conversation from yesterday in Kansas. Awesome. And actually, is it Carrie? I'm assuming this applies Carrie. That is Carrie. If you want to join me on screen, even now, just for a quick minute, just to share some of your reflections on yesterday, what kind of spoke to you, and what resonated with you? Honestly, I have 2 full pages of stuff that I want to get through. Crazy. And even then, the one thing, even as it's just you and I, and for those who are going to watch this later, there's a comment around community that was made that I want to spend some time on. Because we talk about community, and there's people who, and it's kind of alluded to yesterday, there's a sense of a fake community or not authentic community or something along those lines where it's that's not really community. And I want to challenge that because I think community is community. And what I mean by that is that it could be a negative community, it could be a toxic community, but there's still community, and then there's room and dynamics within it to change the dynamics of that community. So it's community and it's dynamic. So it doesn't, even if it's in a bad spot, it can move. It should ebb and flow. It's not a static thing. So I don't know if I just had some problem with that yesterday, and just in general when we start talking about the Plies community or this community, that community, and say that they're not really a community. So that's just a random thought, but I'm going to bring Carrie on now for a minute. That works. So, Carrie, I'm trying to bring you on right now, but it looks like I have like one bar, so my reception might be pretty bad for some reason. It might be on my end, but yeah, try again, please. Yeah, it says unable to join, but I wonder if it's mine. Oh, it did work. Hi.
Ah, hi. Do my tripod here. Can you push that chair over here? Yeah.
Makeshift tripod.
Yeah. My kids take them all the time, so I never know where it's going to be.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So is Carrie?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sometimes it's like acronyms or the name of their studio or whatever, so it's like just want to make
Right.
sure. Nice. So you're in Kansas right now.
Yes.
Very cool. Um, yeah, so thanks for joining me. I'm just kind of reflecting on the conversation yesterday. That's like really where I'm at, like in terms of just a freestyle for today. Like there
Yeah.
was so many talking points. Like I mean, like what's your thoughts on whole like somatics and like trauma informed and all that kind of broad conversation stuff to Pilates?
Well, I think for me it was like being at church because it was just like this is how I have felt my entire Pilates career, and
Okay.
very blessed to work with a lot of people that no one else wanted to work with. So I
Hmm.
had to look into that kind of movement and thought process because it's like, well, if you have severe brain damage, well, I can't just say, okay, well, tip your pelvis and lift yourself into a bridge and da 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 da. Like,
Right.
there has to be, especially if they're non communicative, like, I have to look in his eyes and be like, okay, so are you gonna like work today or are you gonna flip me off with your eyes today? Like,
Right. Yes.
on. So there's a lot of that energy and feedback that I've found, even for myself personally, that I just really think that is a missing piece of that empathy
Mhm.
with people sometimes.
Yes. I hear you on that. So, do you have any kind of formal training, or is it kind of like just feeling it out and exploring it with your clients as they came along?
Well, I'm comprehensively certified in Pilates, and
Hmm.
I've done different courses. One was with a Pilates instructor and a PT, so that was more the biomechanical part of it. And
Yes.
I was a ballet dancer before that, so I have a
Okay.
quality of looking at different things and seeing that eighth of an inch off of movement. And then
Yes.
and then just I think dealing with my own personal traumas and then
Mm.
having that empathy for people and seeing like, okay, today's not the day to try that new exercise with you. Today is the day to
Yes.
you do comfortable and feel like you improved on that. You
Hmm.
have improved on it, but we don't need to focus on this side of things today. And just
Yes.
understanding that flow of if we only woke up every day with the same body and the same emotions, then boy, life would be so much easier.
Right?
But
Well,
it's a
okay.
start every day with everything.
Yes. Absolutely. And that actually reminded me of something that was said yesterday too. And I see Pilates at your desk here, Carrie Ann Bradley. How are you doing? Um, Yeah, about biomechanics. You mentioned the biomechanics, and that was one of the things that came up a couple times too, is that that notion that biomechanics is king, as opposed to appreciating emotional state and past trauma and what they bring in today, like as opposed to just the physical movement the person has. So that was an interesting piece of the conversation as well, is moving from a place of my elbow moves like this or my knee moves like that, and that is determining if the movement is correct or not. It's such a deep conversation.
Yes, and this, like, I can relate this to why I became a teacher and just being a ballet dancer. It's like you can
Okay.
have perfect technique, But if you're boring to watch, who cares? If
Mm,
if you're not making the audience feel something, then who cares if you have the perfect leg and tendu? And
right.
that's the same thing. Like I had this wonderful healing and ballet and movement, and it was everything to me. And then I had an experience where now all of a sudden that wasn't the case anymore. Like it wasn't
Mm,
escape, it wasn't my joy. So then I started doing Pilates and I started doing things again. Like I could start putting all of my mental pieces back together. And I was like,
yes.
ballet has always been that for me. And now
Yes.
this, I needed this. And it was just such an awakening to me in that case.
Well, you know, it's funny. It's one level, it's that awakening, like you said. The other level is just this great piece of knowledge that you can bring when people walk into your space and you're like, I've seen this before. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because like sometimes people don't even know what they're bringing in.
Right. Very, very much so. But like, and I think that's what gave me, like, I'll kind of give a little background net explanation there. So like when I joined the ballet company, like 2 months later, my husband was killed. And he
What?
was, to me in my life, was the only person that had ever loved me for me. So he was my best friend. He was everything to me. And now all of a sudden, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't remember choreography. I just was like, I am a mess. I cannot function.
Right.
And 22 at the time. So it was just, and everyone was like, oh, you're young. Just get over it. It'll be fine. Move on with your life. And I'm like, how? Especially
Yes.
LA wasn't there anymore for me. Like it wasn't, I couldn't,
Yes.
I was so broken.
You have
And
like two things that you're focusing on in your world, and now they're both gone.
right. And so then I happened, one of the last things he gave me when I saw him alive at Christmas was a Pilates book. And so one day I was
Oh,
really bad day and he had wrote something in it and I was just bawling and I was like, I'm going to go to a Pilates class. And I had no idea. I thought Pilates, all I knew of Pilates was ballet calisthenics. Like I thought these were ballet things that I was supposed to be doing. I didn't realize what it was. And then I started
yes.
into it and I was just like, it was like kind of the conversation yesterday of like, oh my gosh, give me more, 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 more. I want more. Like
Yes.
I'm remembering things. I can stand up a little straighter. I'm not crying every time I drop a piece of popcorn. Like it was just such a feeling.
Wow.
Really helped me see that you really never know what someone's going through. And you just kind of have to learn, especially in a wellness or fitness or anything, of look at how they walk, look at their eyes, get to know who they are, even if you're not having personal conversations with them,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but feeling their energy, if you will, if you can believe in
Yes.
giving them what they need so they leave you better than they came in, whether it's physically,
Yes.
within your scope of what you are good and confident in doing and
Love
whatnot.
that. But Carrie, that conversation piece sounds scary, but I don't think it, like you said, it doesn't have to be a big, complicated, in-depth conversation. It is simply to interact with the person in a way that makes them feel better than when you started the conversation.
Yes.
If we're to really boil it down to something, it's that, right? And yeah, that simplifies it, but it's still a scary preposition to be like, what do I, how do I, what if I,
Right.
yeah, yeah. That's a powerful story. That is crazy. Um, you're right. Like, just you never know what people are bringing in to the studio, what they're carrying, and I'm curious too. For that first few Pilates classes that you took, what was it about the way that it was taught, the people in the class with you? What was it that made you feel alive in that space?
I think it was partially in having to work in a way that was a new challenge, because I had focused so much on turnout and lifting and lengthening and jumping, where now all of a sudden, like holding my legs together and still for a moment, my legs were trembling. I was just like, oh, I never felt that connection. And it was, I think, a different way of making me think. Instead of going,
Yes.
okay, the steps, okay, I'm going to regurgitate it the best I can. Okay, now I'm going to practice it over and over again. Okay, now I did it perfect. Okay, now you tell me what to do. This was more of a guided, this is what I want you to feel. This is what I want you to do. This is how I want you to breathe. Okay, now figure it out on your own for a little bit. Okay, now let's
Yes.
focus, maybe work on this a little bit. So it was just,
Mm.
and it was also a gentle, correcting, like a very different from the ballet world of, hey, why don't you just relax and drop your shoulder, relax your ribs and breathe, instead of like getting
Yes.
up and being very aggressive way. So it was just a very
Yes.
calming, or I think it was kind of everything. It was just a different
Yes.
thing than I was used to, because I learned more classical at the very, very beginning. And it was like, oh, okay. Like, and I respect
Okay.
order, and that this is how you want
Yes.
to do it. And okay, I understand this part very well. But then
Yes.
you want me to also flow and move. And it's like, okay. So it was just, yeah, it was interesting.
Well, it sounds like there's this combination of it being gentle and being uncomfortable at the same time.
Yes.
So, like, is that something that you bring into your teaching now? Because I mean, I know that if that was me in that situation, every time I had a new client, I'd be looking for a spot. Where can I make them uncomfortable? Where can I pull them away from what they're familiar with so that they can appreciate this and grow?
Very, very much so. Like, I always tell my clients, I want you working hard, but not straining. So we're looking for a challenge, but I don't want you to feel like you're about to break. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I want you to experience things a little differently. So I always tell them, like, this is what I call a progression exercise. So here's the
Okay.
beginning, and now we're going to challenge this. So sometimes my clients have learned, like, wait, how I'm going to adjust my springs, or I'm going to adjust this. How many reps are we doing of this?
Before we start,
How many how many progressions are we doing? Because I might only give,
yes.
but we have 5 sets of progression that we're going to build up to. So,
You learn
and,
to ask the right questions.
and that's what I love, is them learning. So that way, whether
Yes.
we keep them forever or they move on, that they have that confidence and understanding of making that new arrangement with the teacher of, like, this is what I normally use, but what would you like me to use?
Yes. Nathan Ross Reese the other day said the same thing, but he called it, and maybe this is his own branding, intelligent progressions,
Yeah, I like that.
right? And I was
Yeah,
like, that's exactly it. So it's not just like, okay, this is just the next exercise. We're doing this and then this. It's like, okay, we're doing this, but for you, we're going to go here next. And today we're going to do this and this and this next. And these are the progressions that you need for your body that go logically next, as opposed to like what is the next exercise in order.
right.
And it was a cool conversation around that. So he called it intelligent progressions, much like you're saying, like, this is how we're going to show the next layer and build up this. And then there's times when people, I don't know if this happened to you, where like we're going all the way over here and we stop at 3 and we're like, you know what, let's move on to the next exercise. I think that's good for you guys today. Like, you know, yeah,
Very much, yes.
yeah. Nice. So I don't want to take your whole morning, but do you teach in like a studio? Are you teaching at home? Like how do you do what you do?
Right now, I teach in a studio, and I have a couple virtuals.
Mhm.
Um, so being in a smaller town, we kind of have a little bit of the advantage, and we were pretty blessed with our studio space and being able to have 3 little separate rooms and be able to separate equipment. So
Cool.
we will keep everything socially distanced, and for the most part, ebb and flow apart, so it's not super crowded. So we've been
Right.
pretty. And then I have a couple people that just can't drive anymore because of eyesight issues. So they can still do computers, but don't feel safe going out. So I have a few virtual that way as well.
Very cool. Well, I can't wait to do a full extended conversation with you. There's so many things, some places we can go with all this stuff. So I'm like,
Yeah.
nice. But that's so good. Thanks for sharing the stories like that, Kara. That's so, yeah, blown away.
No, well, thank you. Thank you
Crazy.
for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. All right. So thanks for jumping on. So you just hit the X in the top right corner if you don't know, and then we'll keep this conversation going. Professional fitness education. Thanks for joining us. Um, Christine. Hi, Elizabeth. And Robert Dunbar. How's it going? So the piece that I wanted to talk about really ties into what Carrie was just saying a minute ago. And Ali Green said something yesterday that I want to unpack. And Elizabeth, thanks for joining us today. She was saying, what are we doing and how do we create something more substantial? And the reason why I want to talk about this is like she just said it in passing, that she went on to talk a little bit more about how there should be Pilates in prisons, for example. Because if we're going to spend all this time talking about how important, how present you are in the work, and how breathing is important, and how there's movement brings healing, and how things that happen in our body and trauma that happens in our body manifests through movement, and that movement can be healing, and all these things, why aren't we doing something more substantial with our work? That was the question she asked. And I'm asking the same way. So I'm not hating on people who are doing great work, but I just think overall, globally speaking, there is so much more potential for our Pilates work. There's so much more scope. We can go broader with it. It could be in more places. Like there's yoga in certain places, and there's like a Zumba class on every corner, and all these things. Like, why has Pilates become so tight and not expanded its reach if it's that as powerful as we say that it is? If Pilates is as powerful as we say that it is in changing people's lives, why isn't it further spread out than it is already? Why doesn't it have that global reach? Why isn't it as substantial as some of the other movement practices that are out there? Just asking is a question. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section, or if you'd like to join me on screen like Carrie just did a minute ago for an impromptu chat, give me a thumbs up and I will invite you on. Leave that with you for a moment. There's always a bit of a delay. That's why I always wait before jumping into the next piece. But once again, the question is, why aren't we doing more with our Pilates work if it's as powerful as we claim that it is? How do we create something more substantial, globally speaking? And the example that Ali used was Pilates in the prison system. If there's that much movement, trauma, healing that happens in our body through the Pilates work. Okay, so that's a good point. So Phil is saying exclusively branding how the narrative applies was sent out. So yes, and so that's part of it. So I'll give you an example of that, and there's a real simple, basic example. My son's basketball team. So when they asked me to come in as a conditioning coach, and I say I'm going to do some movement stuff with them, I was training them for weeks on end, and never said we're doing Pilates today, but they noticed that it was helping them with their hip mobility and their knee pain and injury prevention and all that kind of stuff, core strength. So maybe it is out there, but the people who are doing it didn't call it Pilates because they didn't care about the title and they cared more about the movement. That's a possibility too. So that's part of it. So yes, Phil, you're good point there. The narrative around Pilates and how it's being sent out, part of it. So maybe Pilates is out there and the people aren't calling it Pilates. Pilates Lab Buffalo. How are you? I'm going to change the question so you can see it in the chat. So if Pilates is Pilates Lab Buffalo, the question is, this can take too long to type, but I feel like I'm writing on chalkboard. If Pilates is as powerful as we say it is, why isn't it out there more? That's the conversation we had yesterday. We can be doing more substantial. How do we create something more substantial with our Pilates work? So the example was, why isn't Pilates in the prisons, for example? There's like yoga prison projects and there's all these different things. Pilates doesn't have the same breadth and scope, even though we speak all day long, especially on this show, about how powerful it is. And we have somatics and trauma-informed and neuromuscular and this, that, the other. Like, people have found fantastic niches in terms of the work itself, but globally speaking, it's not as broad, it's not as far out there as we always say. What are your thoughts on that, and why, in your opinion, is it not out there? And I agree with Phil's comment there about the branding of it and the narrative around it. Dare we go back to even a lawsuit and just saying that there's, like there was a season when Pilates meant this and people trying to keep it pure and authentic and didn't want to get it watered down by everyone using and throwing the name around, and that's why it became so insular. Could it be that? Carrie's comment here: because many bad experiences, Pilates came off as only the perfect are allowed to do Pilates. Right, exactly. So it became elitist. Only these people can do it. Only these people can teach it because they've been doing it. So if you've been in a class, in a course, decided to become a teacher, and you do this natural progression of taking classes, taking a teacher training, opening a studio, and you do it, and then you stay, and they're just recycling the same people that look like you doing Pilates. So it doesn't get a chance to get out into every people group and every person who may have a different eye and a different heart and different people that they want to connect to the work. Adrienne, how are you? I had to sip my green tea from the Core Conversations mug. Green tea, St. Patrick's Day. Get that? So that's my thoughts on that. Like, I'm just thinking out loud right now, people, because I agree. I feel like there's more that can be done with our Pilates work. And if you're out there doing that more, kudos to you. Continue to do that work and be seen doing it so people can celebrate and expand and just extend your reach with that work. The other part that we talked about yesterday, and we've been having conversations about, so this is kind of a let's talk about yesterday / let's talk about the Pilates industry and the fitness industry in general conversation. We were talking yesterday about looking at the whole person, a somatics example of you are not just a physical body. So biomechanics is not king. There's more than just how my uh, agonist and antagonist work, how my bicep and tricep function, and how I engage my lats when I do certain things. There's a emotional person, there's a trauma person, there's all these different pieces that come into play. I appreciate that. Do we have to do all things and be all things to all people all the time? The answer is no, obviously. But what do we do in terms of recognizing that we're outside of our scope? That, you know what I mean? Like, all these things that we talk about are such high level topics. What if someone just wants to teach Pilates? What if someone just wants to move and to get people sweating? I feel like, you know, this is it. I don't want that person to feel like they're not doing enough. I want them to be able to explore their potential and dive deep on what might be other ways to hone their skills and their specialties and their niche, but don't feel bad if that's just where you're at right now, or if that's where you want to stay. I know some fantastic teachers who love being on the front lines and teaching classes, and that's it. Excuse me, they're great people. They're not getting tied up in the weeds of conversations about heavy things in the Pilates industry. They are not up doing social media, comments and challenging dogma and stuff like that. They are taking care of their people, going home to their loved ones. Full stop. That is allowed. You can do that. And as Carrie's saying right now in the chat, know what you want as a teacher. That is exactly it. I think every conversation circles back to, who are you? Know who you are and unapologetically be that person. CrossFit Greektown. Which Greektown? Is that Toronto Greektown? Where are you located? And the reason why I say this too, and this is kind of like a really superficial, basic analogy, and maybe it's just an excuse for me to show you a picture of my car, but this is my classic car. 1986 Porsche 944. Didn't pay a lot for it. Fortunately, it's gone up in value. I'm not selling it anyway, so it doesn't matter. I have 3 mechanics for this car. 3. And the reason I have 3 mechanics is not because of anything other than I have a guy who lives 1 minute from my house, who is a general mechanic, that if I need, a light bulb goes out or something needs to be installed or something I don't have time to do or something I can't figure out, I give it to him. I have a specialist at Mantis Racing who only, like, they race these cars. They build them from the ground up. They know everything about them. There's my specialist. And then I have what I call a simplest. Jiffy Lube around the corner from work right here. I've taken this car there to get an oil change because, one, the guy who owns it is awesome, and he used to be a mechanic in like a shop, and now he owns this Jiffy Lube. So I know that if I go in there, he could do anything he wants to the car, but he only does oil changes. He knows enough about cars to address a lot of problems, but he only does oil changes. My general mechanic can do anything, and my specialist can do anything with this car, specifically understand the computers, all that stuff. So it's kind of like our Pilates work. You have one guy who loves teaching group classes, and he's just like entertaining, or she just dances around the room and people love them. They're learning lots of stuff, and that's great. You can have someone who works with
neuromuscular challenges and can dive deep into muscle activation in the Pilates work and can speak to those things, and that's great. You can have someone who is somewhere in between and can teach privates and can work with young people and can work with older active aging adults and do it all, and they're like a Swiss Army knife in the work. That's great too. All that stuff is good. Know who you are. And I love the fact that I have these three guys in my world for my car that they're generalists, super specific and super simple, and they can all do their part, and I can go to each one of them when I need them. The question more becomes, do you have these people in your hip pocket? Do I have an Ali Green who knows somatics that I can reach out to? Do I have someone who understands, like Mariska, who does with diseases and things like that? Do I have someone like Kevin Lartigue who works with young people? Do I have these people that I can actually that they can lend their knowledge to me so I can help and hand people off to them if it's too complicated? Crystal, how are you? Like a perfect example of having like someone who understands nutrition and those things too. I understand enough just to hurt people, not to hurt people, but I understand enough just enough. But if it gets more complicated, I hand them off. I don't have to be all things. I don't have to dive deep on that. I can just be me. And I love the fact that we can do that. So when someone lands on what they're great at, this is when I have you on the show. What do you do? What makes you tick? How did you find that? What made you realize that that's what you wanted to do? Done. That's it. So we can look at it holistically, but we don't have to be all these things to people. We could recognize them, identify, hand them off, or we could choose to dive deep on that and take our learning in that direction as well and become the functional expert on that, the subject matter expert on that thing. So are you making a team? Yes, as Carrie says right there. Make that team. Have those people around you that are doing their thing as well as you're doing your thing, better than you're doing your thing. I like surrounding myself with people that are better than me at stuff. And that's not false humility. Like legit, they are so good at stuff that I can hand them off to them and confidently know that they're going to be taken care of. And that builds that confidence in that client to come back to me knowing that I'm giving them the best care, even when they're not in my care. A little bit of a rant there, just some thoughts on all those things. So, yes, if you have anything to share on that, please do. Last thing, Gina Jackson is joining me tomorrow. Excited to have a conversation with her. And yes, join us for that. Carrie, thanks for joining me today. I'm looking forward to our full chat. Thank you to all of you who joined us today. Nice, like, freestyle conversation. Appreciate all of you. And Patricia, I just about to say bye, and then you rolled in. So hi. Hi there, Heather. Yes, so that's basically it. Just think about community, finding your team, surrounding yourself with people who, yes, yes, all good. Watch the replay. I had a great conversation with Carrie about how we create something substantial, how we connect, and how this is the major takeaway was just being able to look at and say, like, you never know what people are bringing into the Pilates studio, and give them that space, do your thing well. And it's funny, just kind of reflections here from Carrie's thing too. The person that taught Carrie in that class at that stage of her life, she may or may not know what was going on. But when you're just unapologetically yourself, you are going to resonate with certain people and that may bring them the life that they need. So you don't have to try and be someone else. You can just be you in a real, authentic way, and that is going to make a difference in the people that is supposed to make a difference for. So on that note, we will sign off. Thank you all for joining us today. We're back at it. Gina Jackson is on for tomorrow, and that is about it. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my day with my son, one more client, and done. Take care, guys. Enjoy your day.